Hello everyone, it's Professor Streeter. I'm going to look at the week 2 module for our ethics course and think about an overview of the week's themes and assignments and say a few specific things about the discussion and the homework for this week. All right, let me put myself here in the corner and hope you're doing well today. Week 2, we are looking at the idea of hedonism, which I've shared some videos about this idea. It's something that John Mill defends. It's an idea also that Epicurus defends. He's a Greek philosopher, and here he is. Here is a sculpture of Epicurus and the dates that he lived in ancient Greece. And he defends a hedonistic view of the good life. What is the good that we're seeking in life? His answer, pleasure. The good life for a human being is the pleasurable life. So then the question becomes, if that's what you're aiming at, how do you organize your life around the goal of pleasure? What does it mean to live a life of pleasure? And Epicurus has a view about that he defends. Mill develops that idea much later in England in the 1800s. So when you hear the word Epicurean, it's often used in reference to eating habits, right? The pleasure of eating. But Epicurus and Mill are focused on all of the different kinds of pleasures that make a human life good and how to achieve them. Okay, so, but also just defending the idea that pleasure is what it's all about, right? That happiness is what everything we do is aimed at. Okay, so that's our goal, to think about that idea, but also to practice reading for argument, to think about arguments that philosophers make defending their ideas, and how to begin summarizing or breaking down into parts the arguments that you're seeing in the reading. Okay, so again, our focus is on the thesis of hedonism and how different philosophers have defended it and some of the objections that have been raised against it. Here is the reading. Schaefer-Landau introduces the theme of hedonism in chapter 1 and 2 of the Fundamentals of Ethics. So chapter 1 looks at attractions of the view, right? Reasons to think that hedonism is the way to go, right? Ways of defending this idea. And chapter 2 looks at objections or problems with the view, maybe reasons for rejecting hedonism and thinking that there are other goods in life that are more fundamental, or that pleasure and happiness are not the only things that matter to us for their own sake. Okay, so that's Schaefer-Landau. Begin looking at the selections from the ethical life. Again, Mill and Epicurus there. I've given you an online version of the text, which you can click the link to here. If you don't have the books yet, you can also read chapter 1 of Utilitarianism, and I've given you the link to Mill's whole book, Utilitarianism, here. But Epicurus, in this letter to a friend, and John Stuart Mill, in this chapter from Utilitarianism, defend the idea of hedonism. Then we have Nozick, who presents the thought experiment of the experience machine. And this is a kind of objection to hedonism, a reason for thinking that maybe happiness and pleasure are not the only things valuable for their own sake. Or, there's more to life, to the good life, than pleasure and happiness. Okay? So, and then finally, we have a piece by Chris Heathwood, who defends a very different view about the good life. Essentially, for Heathwood, the good life is all about satisfying your desires, no matter what you happen to desire. Right? The way to improve the quality of life is to satisfy your desires or get what you want. That's what it means to fare well in life. For your life to go well for you just means, according to Heathwood, that your desires are being satisfied. Okay, so that's your homework assignment then, is to look at a passage from Heathwood. Whereas your weekly discussion assignment is to think about the thought experiment that Nozick gives us. So let's go down here. I've given you some videos to watch. So if you click here, you can see I've got a slideshow down here on the good life, which looks at the thesis of hedonism in detail and arguments against hedonism. Right? So there's 3 different slideshows and videos that go along with it. So there's a 3-part video to the good life slideshow, and then or 2 parts, and then a 2-part video looking at arguments against hedonism. Okay, so those are useful if you're struggling with the reading. Helps break things down. Up here, I've also given you a video showing you how to read the Mill piece on hedonism and I project the reading in the slide in the video, how to work through like the first paragraph and what I mean by reading for argument, what you're looking for as a reader of argument. And then the second video here looks at both of our books together, right? So chapter 1 from Schaefer-Landau, and I relate it to what, so chapter 1 is presenting from Schaefer-Landau's point of view the idea of hedonism as a thesis about the good life. And he's kind of giving an overview of that idea. He references Epicurus and Mill, and that's the source of the idea. This idea of hedonism comes from writers like Epicurus in ancient Greece and John Stuart Mill in the 1800s in England. And so this video shows you how to relate what Schaefer-Landau is talking about to what Epicurus and Mill are talking about in the ethical life. And this models for you what I mean by reading. Try to look at both books together and go back and forth. Okay, so those are things you can watch on your own time. If you come back to week 2 here, looking at the assignments for the week, going beyond the reading. Okay, the discussion. So last week I had you introduce yourself. This week I would like you to think about the experience machine in the discussion. So read it. There's just a 3-page short piece in the ethical life, and think about it. Think about the thought experiment that Robert Nozick gives you. And the first question to answer is, should you plug into the experience machine for life? Why or why not? And I'm primarily interested in your reason. What are your reasons for thinking that you should? Or what are your reasons for thinking that you shouldn't? Try to explain those reasons carefully. We've already got some, so I'm just opening this up. We've already got some posts from Fatima and others. So, but this is just so you, oh, whoops, sorry. So you can see that we've already got a discussion going. I believe you have to post your own before you can read others' posts though. So once you've posted your comment, then you can go in and read what others have said and reply to them. Okay, so there's 2 parts though. First, should you plug into the machine? Why or why not? Explain your reasons. And then secondly, and you can do this either as one post or maybe you want to post twice this week. But the second part of the discussion is reflecting on the reasons that you gave for why you should or shouldn't plug in. What does that reveal about your basic values or about what you value intrinsically? So, for example, if you think that you should plug into the machine for life, does that show that for you, pleasure and happiness is all that really matters? Or if you think that you shouldn't plug in, given the reason that you present, does that show that there are other things that you value for their own sake? And if so, what are those other things that you value for their own sake? And how do they relate to pleasure and happiness? How do they connect? Okay, so that's something to think about there. But the larger question here is reflecting on what you've read from Epicurus and Mill and from Schaefer-Landau's overview of hedonism. Are you a hedonist? Do you identify with this idea that your life is all about pleasure and happiness, that that's what makes your life good, right? That the fundamental good in your life, the highest thing that you can achieve in life is happiness or pleasure. Are you a hedonist in that sense? Why or why not, right? Explain what you mean in your own words. Okay, so here I'm looking for a reflection, a few sentences, a paragraph, right, that you're developing an idea, sharing a comment that others can engage in, and you can start a conversation. Okay, so that's part of the work for this week, to post in the discussion and reply to one of your classmates. And then secondly, we've got another homework assignment. So the personal reflection that I asked you to write, in which you're telling a story that shows us something about what you mean by happiness and what's involved in pursuing happiness in your own case. That's the reflection is due this week. But next week, I want you to turn in the first major homework assignment that is based on the reading. Okay, so the personal reflection is just your own thoughts, your own story. The first homework assignment asks you to look at the Heathwood essay. So read it out, read that essay carefully, and then look at this one passage. Right? And the goal of this homework assignment is to get in the practice of focusing on a specific passage from the reading and analyzing the argument, giving your interpretation, and developing a response of your own. That's what I'll ask you to do in a more involved way in the essays and the exam questions. But for the homework, I just want you to, in this case anyway, in this particular homework, just focus in on one paragraph and give a close reading of it. Okay, so aim for about 250 to 500 words. And here are the questions to think about as you're analyzing this passage. I'm not going to read it out loud, but you can read it here in the video, or if you have the books, you can read it in your book, or I've shared a PDF file of the Heathwood essay if you don't have your books yet. So let me read it out loud. Okay, here's what Heathwood says. Importantly, the point here generalizes. So what's the point that he's making in this passage? You have to read before this page, right? What is the point that he's making earlier? He thinks it generalizes. Okay, so for any of the alleged goods, for any of the proposed goods on the list, so long as it is an objective putative good, that is, a putative good that bears no necessary connection to any positive attitudes on the part of the person for whom it is supposed to be good, we could construct a case similar in all relevant respects to Charlie's case. Okay, so you have to go back and look at the case of Charlie. And he's saying that the point that I was making about Charlie generalizes. This would be a case in which someone gets the supposed good, but is in no way glad to have it, and is in no way glad to have anything else that it gets her. So let's say we're talking about money, right? If money is the supposed good, the case in which someone gets it, but is not glad to have it, and is not glad to have anything else that money gets her. Okay, so I believe that we would again feel confident that this person receives no benefit from that good, right? And the reason we can always construct such a case, I submit, is the idea mentioned earlier, that if something is truly a benefit to someone, it must be something she wants, likes, or cares about, or something that helps her get such a thing. This is why I'm inclined to believe, so this is the voice of Heathwood, this is why I'm inclined to believe that whereas objectivism is the correct view of morality, subjectivism is the correct view of welfare. Okay? So that's the full passage. You need to read what comes before and what comes after, but you're examining this passage and answering three basic questions as you write. First, what is one central claim that you think Heathwood is making in this passage? And what does he mean by that? So in your own words, right? What is the central claim you think he's making? What reason does he give for believing this claim? So identify and explain one reason that you think he gives for believing the claim that you think he's making. And then finally, is it a good reason? Evaluate the reason. Why or why not? Has he given you a good reason to accept his claim? So then give a specific example here to illustrate your analysis of Heathwood. He mentions Charlie's case. That is a specific example, but what is that example? Or you could come up with an example of your own that illustrates what you're saying Heathwood is claiming and the reason that Heathwood gives for making that claim, and whether you think it's a good reason or not, right? Has he persuaded you? Has he given you a reason to accept his claim? That's what I want you to think about as you write, answering those questions, okay? So see how you do with that. This is the first stab. You can think of it as a short essay or just 3 separate paragraphs. That's entirely up to you. Okay, that is the homework for this week. As you can see, if you scroll down, sorry. If we scroll down, I have shared the Heathwood reading here as a PDF file and the Mill reading as a PDF file. You can also find, if you go back to week 1, you go back here to week 1, whoops. You can also find, scrolling all the way down to the bottom, the Nozick Experience Machine as a PDF file, and Mill's Utilitarianism, the whole book. If you just look at chapter 1, that's what we read for this week. Okay, so that's all for now. I've got announcements on the page, so make sure you read the announcements. This week is attendance verification, so you need to make sure you have taken the quiz, turned in one of the homework assignments, or participated in this week's discussion to count as attending for the class. Okay, if you have any questions about any of this, send me an email, and we will be meeting virtually at 12:30 this week online. I'll record it, but we'll have a chance to talk and share some questions, and we'll do some shared work together. And I will send out an email about that again to remind you. Okay, that's all for now. Thanks.